You are watching Tech Confessions, created by Amy Lewis and brought to you by VMware.
Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me, Amy.
Certainly. So we're here today to get your tech confession.
Okay.
The leading question here, when was your software-defined moment? When did you flip over from thinking, hardware, I carry a pager, please don't let it crash, into your software-defined moment?
Yeah, I think I had a series of them, actually. So it certainly started out with my first job in IT, where the demands of delivering the user experience, if you were exceeded by my capacity. So I started scripting and like automating small components of like building out the software installations and provisioning the systems. And then that matured into like server systems and things of that nature. But I think the real switch happened when I was doing IT operations at Cisco, when they were one of the earlier adopters of building out private cloud systems and really dealing with massive scale and growth, and recognizing that you couldn't do it without software. All right, me coming in with an express role of automating as many processes and things that we were doing, and then extending that to I think what we would consider now to be software defined. So I think that was the moment where it really switched for me.
That's interesting. So it really did start out as a very practical, I just can't stand doing this one more time, to how can I do this so much on a bigger scale?
Well, I wouldn't even go with not standing doing it anymore. It was, and this is something that I talk about frequently, specifically around DevOps, is the fact that I was a bottleneck. My personal capacity to execute something had become a bottleneck. It had actually gotten in the way of me actually meeting the objectives for the business, right? They needed the workstations available and they needed it in 2 days, not 6. So the only way to accomplish that in a rapidly growing environment was to automate those processes and streamline them. Same as I progressed into, for instance at Cisco, where when you start dealing at that scale, your capacity to do something as an individual becomes a bottleneck and a constraint for the organization. So I worked to eliminate that. And I think the big transition we're seeing, and why more people are having that software-defined moment now, is that when we look at the architectures that we've put in place over the last 10 years, the intent is we'll identify an architecture, we'll put it in place, and it's not going to need to change a whole lot because we're only delivering for specific x86 server types. And we'll expand into like larger databases, and we'll look at more distributed systems. But now we've hit a point where by the time a request comes in, the way that the demands and the need for agility are, that need can change before the provisioning can even happen. Like it can fundamentally be different. And then the fact that the life cycle of workloads are transitioning now. They're shorter life cycles. We've gone to, they use the pets and cattle analogy, but we've gotten to fruit flies now. Like, these things are just, they pop up, they do something, and they disappear. And so we have to change the way that we look at the architectures we're delivering, because no longer can we look at an architecture and say this architecture is going to last us for the next 5 years, and it's not going to change. Like our architectures now have to be, we're going to deliver this architecture, and we have to be prepared for workloads and needs that we can't even anticipate right now, and we have to make something that can change based on those changes. And that's where the software-defined nature comes in.
I love it, and I know a big part of your commitment to this is sort of sharing that with other people.
Yeah.
When you had that aha moment, like what were some of the things that you did to pass it on?
I think the main thing that I did was engage with the VMUG community. I grew my career around the VMUG organization, and sharing in that space and advocating for people to kind of let that light bulb moment click for them. Interestingly enough, it's really difficult to tell people that they need to automate stuff because it makes their life easier, because that doesn't It doesn't click the way.
Are people worried that they're going to lose their job? Is that their concern, do you think?
I think there's still some people that are concerned with that, but in fact, my VMUG presentations these days, I joke, feels almost like a therapy session. Like it's like, here we go, right? And in fact, I'll walk through one of my therapeutic frameworks in that when one of the things that IT professionals, specifically in the infrastructure space, have to work through is this concept of control. Now, when you work in an environment and have been conditioned to believe that available and reliable is your number one mark and measure, you get very skittish when things can be very dynamic and uncertain, because that could negatively impact how you're measured. And so the way I approach this is that we have to change our framework and our view of what control is. And I've developed a short analogy that helps with this, and it's something that we all have. We have a checking account, and my checking account, I have automatic drafts, direct drafts for my mortgage, for my mobile phone payment, for my vehicles. I have a in my checking account, I have a debit card. My wife has a debit card. We have a checkbook that we use to pay vendors. We use PayPal, Target Red Card. All these things deduct from my checking account. There is no way I can process every transaction and be involved with every transaction. And more importantly, if I tried to process every transaction for my wife, that is not going to be comfortable for our relationship, right? When you think about that, that is not something that instills and shows trust and responsibility. And so why do we do that as infrastructure delivery people to the people consuming our frameworks? Our role needs to be looking at how people are consuming, setting policies and profiles and natural behavior based on our needs. Like, I can look at my checking account, and you can, and we all do, and identify, like, well, that looks odd. Like, I don't understand what that is, but $30 at Target makes sense. $700 at Joann's Fabric would not make sense, right? And if I were to see something like that, which I haven't, by the way, if I were to see something like that would then mean that I need to talk to the consumer, my wife in this case, or myself, if I spent $300 on bourbon or whatever. That is what we should be focusing on. And then how do we further enable those good practices? And then we only need to be engaged when something unique happens.
Right.
Or when we have to make a critical decision that a new project is coming on, like, renovating a bathroom or something along those.
Up-level yourself in the stack.
Right. Yeah. So continuing on that analogy. So when we look at that in our data centers, we need to be doing the exact same thing. We need to improve the relationship we have with our consumers. When we look at this software-defined frameworks, it's really about defining the policies and the behaviors and how the architecture needs to change based on the changing needs. So it's a tough thing for us to make a transition, but people are getting through it.
We'll mature into it, maybe.
That's right. Well, I think that we're going to continue to see the demands on our infrastructure and demands on IT in general are going to continue to put pressure on us to where we have to if we are going to deliver.
I love it. So thank you so much, Josh.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
And when you're ready to make your tech confession, join us at TechConfessionstheshow.com.